Welcome to the With You Rugby Podcast, designed to give you an in-depth look at the United States Rugby Foundation, including our grant programs and recipients, fundraisers, events, and much more. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Vizard, president of the United States Rugby Foundation, and welcome to another of our With You podcast. And as we get closer to our 2023 U.S. Rugby Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which is set for Salt Lake City on Saturday, September 16th, we thought it'd be a good idea to get to know this year's Hall of Fame inductees and special award recipients just a little bit better. And today it's my honor to welcome in former San Diego State, former O Blues, former Eagles 7s and 15s player, and a 2023 U.S. Rugby Hall of Fame inductee, Chris O'Brien. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you.
Thanks, Viz. Great to be here.
And where are you talking to us from today?
We are in Pismo Beach, down by Cal Poly. We're year-round down here now. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on board.
Yeah.
And Chris, as we do with all our guests, tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Where'd you grow up? What sports did you play as a kid?
I grew up in Menlo Park, California, which is right next to Stanford University. My dad went to Stanford, and so we lived, a stone's throw from it. Not too about 4 fence jumps to the Stanford golf course where we would play and then get chased off. It was a great place to grow up. I mean, growing up, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so I played pretty much every sport. I did tennis, swimming, but then football, soccer, baseball. I did a little bit of lacrosse. And, I had to pare it down once I got up into high school. And so, once the high school years came around, it was football, baseball, and soccer until I dumped baseball and soccer because I got a job water skiing. So just did a little bit of everything. And
you didn't mention rugby yet. How'd you get into
the
sport of rugby?
Well, rugby was always in there. Northern California season would always start off with the Stanford 10s. And so that would be, at Stanford before they built all the facilities that they have now, all the Northern California teams would go there. And I would just go sit and watch. And I think I was about 14 or 15 years old. And Tim came off the field and threw me his cleats.
Tim, your brother.
Tim, my brother. And he basically threw me his cleats and goes, "Go play." So that was my beginning of rugby. But yeah, I basically touched, pretty much any sport you could. Just, being the youngest of 5, I was out of the house, and I think my parents were pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Well, you're a place kicker for the San Diego State Aztecs football team from 1984 to 85. Did you get a scholarship there? Were you a walk-on? Tell us about how you got the kicking job there.
No, it was a funny thing was, I played at junior college at Foothill Junior College in Los Altos, and the special teams coach at San Diego State came up and was recruiting me to come to San Diego State. And for some reason, they already had place kickers and punters on scholarship. So I was basically, Coach Zonner had told me that, hey, we don't have a scholarship for you, but you're going to be an invited walk-on and you'll be able to compete for a job. So I ended up going down. I left a quarter early from junior college to go to San Diego State. So I was there for spring ball in 84 and started competing for a job. And the funny thing was myself and our punter at the time, we were both walk-ons and we both earned the starting jobs. So they had all these scholarship kickers on, and had myself and my buddy Wayne Ross were both walk-ons in the starting roles.
And you also played rugby at San Diego State. Any highlights from your rugby playing days with the Aztecs?
San Diego State was an awesome place to play rugby. Steve Gray was my coach, and Locke Vetter, and we had just a fantastic camaraderie. My football coaches kept asking me to stop playing rugby, and I said, "Give me a scholarship." So back then they wouldn't do anything, right? So they would just look at me and they're like, "I guess all right. So I just kept playing rugby, but our playing days, you know, in I think it was 85 was our second year. My brother Tim was coaching at Cal, and we went up to play in the Pacific Coast playoffs, and I thought we had the best team in the country. I mean, we had some very talented players on our team. And I mean, even the likes of Randy Kirk, who ended up playing in the NFL as a long snapper, short snapper, for years, was running a 4.4 40 and a linebacker at San Diego State and just running people into the walls at the Aztec Bowl. But we just had a great time together. And Tim, when we went to the Pacific Coast playoffs in 85, Tim, you know, told me, he goes, "Hey, tell Steve, don't take Chico State lightly." And so unfortunately, he sat too many of us and brought us in a little bit too late. And I thought we were that year the best team in the country. But the following year, San Diego State went on to win the national championship. And so I wasn't there that year. But it was great days back then where you could dabble in both. You can dabble in other sports, and, you know, the coaches just kind of, you know, looked at you and, you know, I never told them that I water skied for San Diego State. And had they known that, I think I would have been in a little bit of trouble.
Right. Now, you got a couple of looks from some NFL teams. Tell us about those tryouts. And did you have dreams of playing in the NFL?
Yeah, I always wanted to play in the NFL. I thought that was the ultimate dream. The year that I came out of San Diego State, I think that was the last time that there was kickers drafted for a while. You know, there was John Leake. There was a slew of guys, and I was right there in the mix with them. And so I ended up getting a call from the Philadelphia Eagles to come replace Paul McFadden, who was injured for a week. And so I ended up kicking in I don't know how many preseason games. But like my first one, I'll never forget my kickoff against the Miami Dolphins. Lorenzo Hampton, who was a running back, you know, for Miami, this guy was a stud, and he breaks through, and I'm like, oh no. So it's just my first kickoff in the NFL, and this guy breaks through, and I have to make a tackle. So it's kind of fun, but it was a great experience.
Did you make the tackle? Okay.
I made it. I had about 8 inches of AstroTurf left in my arm for about a month. That kept bleeding out. And then my best experience was when I signed with the New York Jets. Being a cocky little young 20-something-year-old, right? When I signed with them, I asked them, I said, is it okay if I go on a rugby tour before I come to camp? They're like, huh? I go, well, I got invited on this team to go to South Africa. So that means I would be like a week late. And right away they said, yeah, no problem. And I was like, huh? So they let me come to camp with the veterans, which was pretty cool. And it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life because I played every preseason game to the last game, and I got cut after the last game.
All right. Well, I guess football's lost as rugby's gain. You moved back to the Bay Area after that, hooked up with the Old Blues. You played on a lot of very good Old Blue sides with a lot of talented players. What are some of your favorite memories of your days with the Blues?
I will say, like, when I first started playing for the Blues, playing on the third team, you're surrounded by a bunch of Eagles. I mean, Armstrong is in the back line. You've got Roy Haley was in the back line. You know, you got all these guys, and I'm like, these guys play for the Eagles, and I'm just a kid, right? So that was cool when I was like a teenager. And then going in, you know, being groomed by Bo Meyersick, you know, who I still call the greatest of all time. I think so highly of Bo and everything that Bo has done. You know, and being able to play next to Roy and Tim, pretty special. And then when those guys finish, you know, I've got Drew Marish and Rich Pearson and Wayne Chai. These guys were all centers that had cups of coffee with the Eagles, right? So it was a very talented side, a lot of good guys coming out. And just the Old Blues was just the camaraderie that we had with that club, pretty much the same that you had at Allenback. You know, we camped together, we skied together, we did everything together, and that's what makes a team, right? And so we did all this stuff together. So it was always the memories there, and, we won, we had fun. But then my favorite part was, playing against Ombak, playing against Belmont then, playing against, the way the rugby was back then, our leagues, the way they were, it wasn't easy, so it was always, Old Blues rugby was always, still, one of my favorite parts, of my career.
Well, you and I played a lot of rugby against each other and together. We played for the Grizzlies, the Eagles, both 15s and 7s. What were some of your memorable moments from those days with the Grizzlies and the Eagles?
Well, the Grizzlies, hands down, what stands out the most was the 1988 South Africa tour. It was probably, coaching and playing and going on a lot of tours, still probably my favorite tour that's ever left this country. The way we were taken care of, we actually weren't supposed to be there, right? And being told that if you go there, you can't go to Russia on an Eagles tour. And we all looked at each other and go, we're going to South Africa, right? So that's like, for the Grizzlies, the camaraderie on the Grizzlies, because it was a lot of us that all played for the Eagles. So, you go 86 Argentina, when you tour every 2 years, it was just so much fun. We all knew each other so well. We were all, competitors, but teammates and all that. And so there's not a day that goes by, when you think about your rugby career, that, you think about the Grizzlies and how much fun we had on that. And then bringing some of the extra characters in, on the Eagles was awesome. We all, back then, I think, I think the way we all got along and the camaraderie and, a lot of the team building that we did on our own, was pretty special.
Mm-hmm. You remember the Eagles at the 91 Rugby World Cup. Does any memory stand out from that tournament for you?
Yeah, well, a couple memories stand out. Horrible memory was I had been playing all the way up into the World Cup after I came back from an injury, but we're starting all the games, and I got dropped for the first game against Italy, and I don't think I handled it too well. But got over it, and I was told, we're going to play so-and-so against Italy. You get the All Blacks game. Biggest memory? Playing against the All Blacks.
Right.
Because back then, when you think about that, you think we all played, there was a lot of players, we all knew each other pretty well. Michael Jones is on the All Blacks, and he and I were roommates playing for the Hawaii Harlequins after he won the MVP in '87 World Cup. We played in 1988 together for the Hawaii Harlequins. That's pretty special, right? So, and then you got, Terry Wright, you got a lot of the sevens guys. So we all crossed over back when we all played 15s and sevens, which was pretty cool. But my best memory was probably in the 70th minute against the All Blacks. I had passed a ball and I had taken 3 or 4 steps, and I get absolutely knocked deep into the dirt. And I look up, and it's Michael Jones. And I grab him by his jersey, and I looked at him like, why'd you do that? And he goes, I had to hit you once. Here's the greatest player in rugby at the time, right?
Right.
And he just goes, I had to get one shot on you. And he just cleaned my clock, right? So that was a pretty, that was a pretty cool memory. And then, as just going out on Twickenham and playing against England, that's pretty special. We've had some pretty special moments in our career, and when you look back at some of those, a full Twickenham stadium, there's really not much better than that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're also a member of the Eagles team at the first ever Sevens World Cup. Besides the cold weather, what do you remember about that 93 Sevens World Cup at Edinburgh?
We underperformed.
Yeah.
From what I remember. I actually had to make a decision. We were playing in the Pacific Coast playoffs, 15s in Long Beach. And so I think you and I think Gary, you guys all took off.
No, we stayed. We were there.
Yeah. And so, I made my little stubborn decision then that my club gets me to where I am. And I said to Gary, I said, hey, listen, I'm not leaving with the team. He's like, huh? I go, I'm going to stay behind. Old Blues got me where I am. I'm playing tomorrow, and then I'll get on an airplane. And I just felt like I was making the right decision because the World Cup, I think we were going like 10 days early or something like that. We had a lot of time.
Long tour, though. It was
a long tour. There was time to spare. So I stayed behind and played against Belmont, beat them, and we were supposed to play on back the next day, and I had to get on a plane. And so here I am walking through the airport all by myself in my number ones, and I walk into Bob Dwyer and the Australian team, and Bob's like, what are you doing? I go, I think I'm in trouble. The team left yesterday, and I'm a little bit behind because I want to play for my club. He goes, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of you. So they're all sitting in first class. So I get bumped up into first class. The Eagles, we didn't fly for first class. So Bob bumps me up. And so I got there, and yeah, I could tell a couple of the East Coast guys weren't too thrilled with me, but we mended our fences pretty quick there. And, it was a cool tournament, being the first ever, no big, I don't think big crowds from what I remember.
Yeah.
But like I said, we underperformed, but it was a fantastic experience, and it was great to be a part of it.
You get that right. Now, after your playing days, you got into coaching rugby. Tell us about how that transition from playing to coaching happened.
I always wanted to coach, and I always wanted to give back. And so my first part was Julie and I, we were living down in Burlingame when I first got hired into the fire department, and one of the guys from our fire department was coaching at Burlingame High School. So I asked if I could help out. And so I just sparingly helped out a little bit here and there. And it was just I always just thought that there was something that I wanted to give back to. Right. And, being in the fire department, it gave me the opportunity, the time to be able to give back to rugby. And so a couple of years later, when I started coaching at Cal, with Tom Billups and I both started at the same time. The cool thing was my firehouse was right down the street from Cal. We were down at 51st and Telegraph, so Memorial Stadium's 2 miles up the road. So, and my captain at the time happened to be a Cal alumni guy and a big sports guy. So he would allow me time to go up and coach on certain days or certain times. If we had a game, we'd bring 5 truck, and the guys would sit up on the ladder truck and watch games. And it was actually in our fire district for the truck. So it worked out. So yeah, so I just had a passion for it. It just, we left and went up to Sacramento for a couple of years and ended up coaching with Mike Purcell and Steve Gray at Davis High School, which was fun. And then, I just wanted to keep that going. I just wanted to always give back. There was just that passion. I wasn't playing anymore, but I wanted to figure out a way to give back.
Mm-hmm. You went from assisting Jack at Cal to the head coaching job at Stanford. Was that a big step up for you? And I'm sure with that came a lot more responsibility.
Yeah, it did. But I was an assistant coach for a couple of years there first, before I took over the head coaching job. It was awesome. I mean, you're working with, it's kind of like what I'm working with now at Cal Poly, these highly intelligent kids where you can't recruit and you try to recruit from within the campus. And so the funny thing was when I became head coach at Stanford, Jim Harbaugh had just been hired as the head football coach. So I knew the director of football operations pretty well. And so I went in and I said, hey, you think I could go talk to Coach Harbaugh? He's like, yeah, just go walk in his office. So Coach Harbaugh and I are the same age. He was at Palo Alto High School and I was crosstown at Woodside High School. Same age, same years, everything. And so I went in and just kind of broke the ice with that and told him, hey, I'm the new head coach at, for the rugby team, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm sure guys quit when you got hired because they weren't recruited by you and they knew they weren't going to play. He looks at me, he goes, yeah. He goes, could you just put them on that red path over to the rugby field? And coach was pretty funny. He's like, you know what? I've got 7 kids that I keep in touch with that all quit, that I will reach out to. Lo and behold, a couple months later, all 7 kids showed up on my rugby field. And one of them, Pat Dennehy, who was a tight end for Stanford and recruited by the coach before, ended up playing in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. So that's pretty cool. And, the other guys were just, for Stanford Rugby, the only bummer was it was so short-lived because these guys were towards the end, but they were just phenomenal athletes. And it was just a blast to be able to start to turn that program around.
Denny was a stud, man. He was fun to watch.
Oh my God. He walked up, I'll never forget. He walked up to the side of the rugby field and he had this tight Nike top on, and he's just chiseled. And he goes, hey coach, can I come out and play? I was like, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, no, Pat, and I think Pat still to this day, he works for Google, I believe, still in Australia with his family, and I think he's still playing rugby over there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Okay, so after Stanford, if I get this right, you're a director of rugby, head coach at Danville High School. You coached the team to their first high school national championship in 2018. How fun was it to coach those high school players, and how rewarding was it to win that national championship?
It was awesome. I had the stint in between with the Eagles, and a buddy of mine, Dave Leibowitz, kind of talked me into coming out and doing some high school stuff. And so when I went out and did it, it was just all of a sudden so rewarding, because you're teaching these kids. But a lot of these kids, you have to understand, start in middle school. Like with the Danville program, they've got a really, really cool process with all these kids. So I'm coaching a bunch of kids that have been around, but I'm a very basic coach. It's pass, catch, footwork. You have to do the little things right before you teach the big things. And even now, I don't teach really the big things that much, because if you don't get the little things right, you can't go to that next step. So if you can do the little things, you can still achieve a lot. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool to build these kids and to watch them grow. And, they were all sponges. And the great thing was in 2018, we brought them to England and Wales. Fantastic tour, camaraderie. They got to see what it was like. And that's the year that we came and we won the national championship. The next year we brought them to New Zealand. And we had, quite a few injuries, but, we still came in 5th place in the country. It was just fun to watch these kids grow, and then to watch them go on to college and see what they're doing now in college. So like for me now at Cal Poly, to see all the kids just come up to me after games that I've coached over the years is pretty fun. It's really, to me, it's really rewarding.
Yeah. And you touched on it. You had a gig with the Eagles coaching for several years, including the 2011, 2015 Rugby World Cups. What was that experience like, and what were some of the fond memories from those years?
At first it was, when I got hired as kicking coach, I could tell some of the guys were looking at me like, who is this guy? Right? Why do we need a kicking coach? But as we developed, and as you develop a relationship with your players, and they see what you're like and how you coach, you develop a certain camaraderie with these guys. It was fun to watch. Step back to like the 2011 Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. We didn't have really a designated kicker, and we were walking into it going, all right, who's going to kick? And I'm like, shit, I don't know. We had some guys, but I wasn't positive who I was going to put on. And So Patterson ended up becoming our kicker in New Zealand, and he was Kiwi born, right? The funny thing was I'm so old school that we get to our first match and I tell, I don't know, someone from the coaching staff, hey, I need a bucket of sand. They're like, huh? I go, make sure we have a bucket of sand. So at practice a couple times, I wanted our kickers kicking. I didn't like the tee, old school, dig a hole, just the strike point was so much better than being up on a tee because the ball spins too fast and you're not hitting the right point, right? And so we show up at our first game in New Zealand and we're warming up and the sand was black. So we're putting down these little things of sand and we're doing our warm-ups and some guy comes up to me and he goes, hey, you can't use sand. I go, what do you mean we can't use sand? He goes, you can't use it for the Rugby World Cup. I'm like, is it a Rugby World Cup rule or a New Zealand rule? He goes, in New Zealand, we don't use sand. I said, okay, well, I know we're in New Zealand, but this is the Rugby World Cup. So we got to use sand the whole tournament. And he kicked great. It was pretty funny, but just watching the guys develop, Mike Petrie, watching him develop on his box kick, just getting the footwork right, over the years, Chris Wiles, watching him develop, was really, really fun. And then working with AJ McGinty. Talk about a kid that, the team would be gone. I'm like, all right, just leave me a van. We would hours just be behind and kick. Blaine Scully in 2011, I tried to get, because they brought in this punch kicking. I hated the punch kicking. I wanted to go back to spirals, knock a spiral from the 22 to the 22. And the funny thing was Blaine worked. I have photos of him. He looks like an NFL punter. And we get into, I forget the game. We get into a game, we get a penalty. I'm like, Blaine, I go spiral. Just shanks it. I was like, all right, that was the last chance.
So what do you think of the 50-22 law? You like it?
I do like it, actually.
Yeah.
When it's, if you have a left-footed kicker and a right-footed kicker on the field and you have those skills, there's only so many teams that can do that right now.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's great.
I do too. I love it. Okay, so for the past 2 or 3 years, is 2 or 3 at Cal Poly?
I've been at Poly for 2. I just finished my second season.
Okay. You've been with the head coach of the Cal Poly rugby team. How did that job opening present itself to you? And how has that experience been so far?
It was a COVID thing. Danville, we weren't doing a lot during COVID. I was personal training a lot of kids. And I saw the Cal Poly job and I didn't think much of it. And then, a buddy of mine goes, hey, why don't you think about going to Cal Poly? I'm like, I own a home in the Bay Area. I wouldn't be able to relocate. And I talked to Tim about it a couple times and Tim's like, hey, maybe you should look at Cal Poly. And like, I don't know how I could figure it out. Then Julie and I were in our pool one day and I kept bringing it up to her. I'm like, hey, this Poly thing keeps coming up. She goes, well, why don't you do it? I'm like, huh? So my wife was the one that pushed, right?
Okay.
So Julie's the one that said, why don't just look into it? She goes, our daughter, she goes, Sydney can live here at the house and take care of the house and we can move down to the Central Coast. I'm like, huh? And so I called my brother and I'm like, Tim, give me the information for the director of rugby at Cal Poly. So Charles Zanoli, who is, Higgy's coach at Cal Poly. So I called Charles and 2 weeks later, I got offered the job. And it's probably one of my favorite moves I've made. I think my first year, just the way, year one, it was kind of just got thrown in, no direction, no nothing. And we had a good group of kids, but I had a very young team. And this past year, I think we made great strides. And like my first year when I had a free weekend, I didn't know the area. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't really sure. Now, the way I do my scheduling, if there's a free weekend, there's team culture stuff going on. There's team bonding. We're running hills. We're doing something in the sand. We're always together. And it's really, really cool how it's brought this group together. They are very, very tight knit. We're not really losing a lot of guys from this past season. So I'm having a gas, and it's always fun to coach college kids because they ask you about, what's the next step? I've got 3 guys that have already asked me about the fire department. 1 kid from last year that's already in the fire service, and 2 that I think have jobs this summer, part-time jobs. So that to me is pretty cool, where I can help assist them in their next career. But I mean, heck, they're engineers and architects. I can't help any of that stuff. I look at them and go, I couldn't even get into college now.
Right, yeah. Well, we're going to look in your past here a little bit now. Of all your rugby memories, is there one that stands out amongst the rest?
You know what? When I got selected for the Eagles in 1988, and Tim coming back from injury, and both of us were on the same team together, and winning my first cap, I thought that was pretty cool. When I look back on that, that to me is a pretty big memory for me.
Was that Canada and Lake Placid?
No, that was wasn't that in New York at Selfridge's place?
Oh, Ed Lee? Nah, I can't remember hell.
Yeah, you know what?
Worse than yours, so I don't know.
This thing doesn't work too well.
Yeah, that's a good memory though. So you and Timmy got to play for the Eagles together. That's cool.
Well, the cool thing for me, I mean, our other brother Peter, who played for San Francisco Rugby Club, he was a fantastic scrum half. Dislocated his sternoclavicular against Cal. This was back when Cal played the old Blues, San Francisco. They played the men's teams.
Yeah.
And so Peter got injured, and so our goal as brothers was, play for the Pelicans together, play for the Grizzlies together, right? And so luckily for Tim and I, we played for the old Blues together, we played for the Pelicans together, we played for the Grizzlies together, and we played on the Eagles together. So to me, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, heck yeah. Now, of all your tours, Eagles or otherwise, which one stands out and why?
Well, there's 2. Like I said earlier, the Grizzly tour in '88 to South Africa. Here we are, young 20-something-year-olds getting paid, but not being able to bring the money out of the country, right?
Right.
But playing some of the top provincial sides in South Africa and beating Natal was probably still one of the biggest U.S. games, right? One of the biggest U.S. victories. And then being tied 12-12 at halftime against Western Province. I don't know why I remember that. And losing I think we lost 23-12, and they were loaded with Springboks, right? And that just showed how good our program was at the time. And that just stood out, just how we all I think it was a 5-week tour, and it was just so much fun that we had together. And then our tour, our France/Russia tour, we had to overcome quite a bit on that tour. We were starving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I snuck in, I forget whose room I snuck into, and I was stealing a peanut butter and jelly and salami from someone's room that they brought from France, right? So because the food was so bad. But we played, we won the sevens tournament. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, almost everybody in that team, well, you, me, Saunders, Higgy, Gary, all Hall of Fame, right? That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool when you look back and you think about that. But those were, we had all little partial memories here and there, but there's something, here we are in Moscow, where who gets to go to Moscow, right? And be in Red Square and play and
the Soviet Union back then.
Yeah, it was it was sketchy, but we always made the best of it.
Yeah.
Gary Lambert traded all of his clothes away.
Now, looking back on your rugby career, what are you most proud of?
You know, I'm pretty proud of how just determination and just sticking with the process. And I think it was 1989 or 90 when I broke my neck against Japan, and being able to just come back from injuries. I mean, I was pretty nervous about that, but then I had an older brother that pushed me pretty hard, and that, you know, rehabbed really hard and just wanted to get back to the top level. So I'm proud of just trying to stay at a high level for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if Tim was the brother you're talking about, but you now
Yes.
joined Tim as the first brothers to be inducted into the U.S. Rugby Hall of Fame. What does being selected to the Hall of Fame mean to you?
It's a huge honor. You know, it's nothing that it's not like when I first start, you know, you start playing or coaching or doing something, say, I want to be a Hall of Famer or anything like that. It just, I'm just very honored. I think it's very cool. But it also shows the passion that, you know, Tim and I were really lucky that, you know, our dad played rugby at Stanford, and we grew up on the side of a rugby field. We're like two little foreign kids, right? El Camino Park in Palo Alto, where we watched our dad play rugby. And then he founded the Palo Alto Rugby Club, and then Tim plays Palo Alto Rugby Club. And, you know, everything just goes, and we start playing. And it was that was more like our first sport, which was really cool. So I'm just proud of the fact that, I mean, it's nice to be honored. You know, like I said, it's not nothing that I set out to do, but I'm really happy with it.
You know, I learn things every day. I didn't know your dad played rugby.
My dad was the founder of the Palo Alto Rugby Club and played rugby at Stanford. So yeah, he and Mickey Ording. So Mickey was one of the first Eagles, right?
Yeah, he's my first rep coach too in North Carolina. I was there for 1 year.
Yeah.
Another Hall of Famer.
Yeah, my dad refereed for a long time. Played rugby, refereed in NorCal. Yeah.
Chris, congratulations. Well-deserved honor. Thank you for taking the time with us today, and look forward to seeing you in Salt Lake City on September 16th.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Viz.
All right, folks.
All right.
That's going to do it for this edition of our With You podcast. I want to thank Chris O'Brien for joining us today. And we're going to have more of these With You podcasts as our Hall of Fame induction ceremony gets closer. Once again, that's going to take place in Salt Lake City on Saturday, September 16th. Go to our homepage at usrugbyfoundation.org for more information. And until next time, stay safe, everyone.